Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Georgie Fleming, and I'm one of the training technicians here at CaseWare UK. Today, I'm joined by Rob Millen, our Cloud and Practice Management Product Manager. During today's webinar, we will be looking at engagement tracking in CaseWare Cloud. Rob is going to be taking you through the presentation, while I'll be answering the questions you raise during the session. Before I hand over to Rob, there are some housekeeping items we will run through. I have mentioned questions. Please do type them into the questions field on the control panel of the GoToWebinar rather than using the hand raising feature. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, and we will try and incorporate as many of your questions into that session as possible. We are recording this webinar today, and we will publish the recording on the knowledge base. And dependent on how many questions we receive, we may also publish a Q&A document. Without further ado, I shall hand you over to Rob.
Brilliant, thanks George. Afternoon everyone. So today I want to talk about engagement tracking in CaseWare Cloud. It's something that we've been working on behind the scenes for a little while now. Some of you may be more aware than others about what those are and where we are with them. So I want to try and clarify our position as of today. So just a reminder for anyone watching the recording, this is the 11th of June 2019. Things may have moved on if you're watching the recording. So the kind of thing I want to talk about today, then let's start at the beginning. What are engagement trackers? I'll give you my opinion on what they are and what they provide to a firm, and also our plans going forward as well. So let's start at that point. Engagement trackers then do rely on you setting deadlines. Well, I say rely, perhaps rely is the wrong word. It would certainly enhance the feature if you were to set deadlines, let's put it that way, and it will then allow you to sort of measure your progress in comparison to those deadlines. So I'll show you how to set deadlines. We'll also then look at obviously how you access trackers. So they are a CaseWare Cloud dashboard, if you like, or a view. And they can obviously be accessed therefore from CaseWare Cloud. A couple of different ways of doing that, either through a browser or through working papers. We'll then look at the filtering options, just so you can filter the engagements you see in that dashboard by those perhaps are assigned to you or those that are either completed or not completed. And the filtering options is something that we are actually going to be working on a lot more going forward. And then lastly, I'll just sort of finish up by talking about dashboards in a bit more detail, and you know, we'll look at trackers as a dashboard, but really most users of CaseWare Cloud should consider at least having their own personal dashboard, which would show them perhaps trackers, but perhaps also tasks or discussions or file requests, a list of clients, a list of engagements. You know, it really is defined by you. If you're using the time and billing tools in CaseWare Cloud, having an overview of your top 10 WIP clients, a summary of your time over the last month or year or whatever, you can configure all this kind of stuff in there. So we'll perhaps just finish on that, and then obviously we'll take questions afterwards. So that obvious question of what are engagement trackers, I've tried to keep it brief there, but I would describe them as a report of all engagements linked to your CaseWare Cloud server, visually expressing progress for a predefined list of key deadlines or milestones. Okay. Well, I'll show you them in a minute, and you can make your own minds up on how you think they work. But I think something really important to point out at this stage is that we are going through a beta process. So they are a beta version of engagement trackers currently. So therefore, there are some limitations, and I want to make those clear from the beginning. It also is something that we would like you to contact us about in order to request access to them. There certainly won't be any lengthy process. It's simply just a case of flipping a switch on our end just to enable them on your server, but we do want to keep some sort of control on who has them, so we can perhaps ask for feedback and just keep a bit of a lid on that. Just to be completely clear about what specifically we're tracking, so firstly, accounts production, and again specifically we're tracking the Accounts Advanced template. So any engagements you've built on the Accounts Advanced template, providing you're now up to the EPAC that came out on Friday, which I know is slightly short notice, but we're talking about EP 40304. released in June 2019. So long as you've accepted the updates on an engagement for those for that from that EPAC, sorry, you should be good to go. Okay, or at least as and when you do that. Okay, we're talking also UK companies at this stage. So UK companies, not LLPs, just UK companies as our beta test. So providing you're using those, then yeah, you should be able to start tracking. We will of course expand that out to Irish companies, to LLPs, to all the specialist entities as well in due course. But again, just for the beta period, we're going to sort of limit that slightly, just to keep it manageable. Moving then to the audit template. This will cover both the Mercia and the HAT templates, but we are again sticking to companies. So as long as you're working on a company rather than an LLP or an academy or charity, then the trackers will work for those engagements. And when it comes to corporation tax, well, to be fair, there is no limit there on the basis that the corporation tax template or component will deal with only UK companies anyway. We didn't really need to limit that any further. Okay, so really, if you're working on a company, a UK company, you should in theory be able to track your accounts, your audit, and the corporation tax all through one engagement, all through a combination of trackers in CaseWare Cloud. So if you are, I'm going to talk to you a bit how to request access to these. As I say, it's just a very simple flick of a switch for us. We don't need masses of information from you or an explanation of what you're going to be doing with it. We just simply need you to let us know, and I'll give you the information on how to do that in a second. But if you could make it clear exactly which ones you'd like to look at, if that's all three, brilliant. If it's perhaps just one, then let us know. Okay, so this is what the trackers look like. This is the accounts production tracker. They all work kind of the same way. I'll show you some of the nuances as we go through. But if we were just to look there at the overview, you can see I've got a list of engagements. We've got some markings to express whether those tasks have been done, these predefined tasks that we've decided on. And you can see if you hover over individual items, you can see a bit of information about when that particular milestone or deadline is expected or was completed, depending on what the situation is. Okay, couple of things just to point out. We have got the little person icon here, which allows you to switch your view or filter it by those engagements that have been assigned to you as an individual user. So I'll explain how you do that and what that means once we actually get to a proper demo in a second. But that's obviously a really important tool. We do want to, hopefully get as many as possible using that for not just for trackers, but for all sorts of different reporting options. If you can start to assign engagements to the team that are using it, that's going to make your life a lot easier as we go forward with some of these kind of tools. Okay, so I'll show you that a little bit later on. We've also got the filter button here, which is, in theory, will give you lots of filtering options going forward. Again, for the beta period, very simple binary filter, which is basically going to allow you to show or hide or include or not include a completed engagement. So currently I've got that filter set so that therefore completed engagements don't appear in my view, because clearly as time goes on there's going to be far more completed than not completed. So the assumption is you want to filter those out. So again, I'll show you that in more detail later. Just to be very clear about the markings then, we do have the grey items, which means effectively that particular milestone or deadline has not yet been completed. Hopefully that's clear enough. So Crest Furniture Limited, we haven't filed with Companies House yet. Whereas with Bodian Builders Limited, we have received the records. So that milestone clearly has been met. And again, I'll explain more about how CaseWare knows that in a second. Okay, we then have the orange icons, so accounts prepared. We are 4 days away from the deadline there for ABC Motors having the accounts prepared. Okay, so if it's orange, it means that the deadline for that event is 7 days, or is within the next week. Okay, and it will tell you precisely the number of days in the circle. And then you have the red items, which will indicate that we have got or we have missed the deadline on that particular event. Okay, so hopefully that's nice and clear. There is a video that plays if you click on what are trackers, and that will go through and explain that again, or for anyone that obviously isn't on this webinar, hasn't seen this webinar, just to give them a bit more information. Okay, And again, for further information, we do have the following release notes. Okay, and we're actually George is going to make those available to you as a download if you're on the webinar. We'll attach them to the recording if you're watching the recording, so you should be able to get hold of those. So effectively within each of these release notes, so for accounts, audit and tax, we have given you a bit more information about how trackers work. Again, really prompting you to join the beta group really. But certainly with accounts, production and tax, just giving you a bit more information about how we decide whether an event has been completed. So I would definitely have a look at those release notes. Certainly if there's one particular tracker you think you're going to use, and just take the time to have a look at those. Okay, so if you do have any questions about the beta, whether you want to be part of that beta process, and as I say, it's really not too much work for you to do. It's simply just to let us know so we can enable it on your server. And that's pretty much it. Or if you have any questions about it, please email us at beta@caseware.co.uk. Give us a bit of information about what exactly you're trying to beta, because obviously we have lots of beta products going forward, and we'll have. So yeah, let us know exactly what you're talking about, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Okay, let's give you a chance to sort of take those documents if you are. And whilst you're doing that, I'm just going to flick to an engagement file. Okay, so I'm looking at a job that I'm working on. This is Crest Furniture Limited. It is an engagement file that has actually got the accounts, the audit, and the corporation tax components built in, all working off one engagement file. So I just want to show you on this, using this demo file, how we can set deadlines firstly. Okay, so from an accounts production perspective, the wizard document, you'll notice that if you open a wizard document after taking the most recent EPAC 40304, you are prompted for updates. I've already taken those updates on this particular wizard, and you can see I now have this new key deliverable section at the foot of the engagement setup tab. So the idea really being going forward that as you start new jobs, as you roll them forward and start working through the wizard, you'll be prompted to post this information. Okay, so it's not mandatory, but obviously it does give you some sort of comparison to work with when you're looking at the cloud trackers. So the first job really at the very beginning of the job is to just fill in those expectations. Obviously they can move, they complete the input, so you can fill those in as you see fit. The sort of legal deadlines, if you like, for the last two, Companies House and HMRC filing, those are driven, the items in brackets, these are driven from whatever you put in accounting dates. So we are asking for this information from you just to make sure that we, are 100% accurate all the time. So those will be sort of stored there, but you may have your own internal deadline. Although HMRC required them by then, we would really like to have them far well before then. So you can put your own expectations in rather than deadlines, if you like. Okay, now when it comes to completing these actions or these deadlines of these deliverables, I'll come back to that in a second. I just want to show you from an audit perspective. If you're working on an audit file, again, so long as you've taken the most recent update on the company audit template. So I'm working on the Mercia Audit Advanced template here. So I've got version 20.001 installed. And if I was to type in AUAT in the browser bar here, that would take me to a document that we've introduced recently. Again, we've not really signposted it particularly well, quite deliberately, because we're still looking at beta functionality at this stage. But again, it gives you that same kind of idea. We've defined these as being at least our first attempt at the kind of deadlines you'd want to manage, and you are able then to plug in your expectation for those. Now, when it comes to CaseWare then tracking against that to say, okay, well, what have you actually done? In the sake of the audit we're looking at here, you can actually see the guidance here is telling you, well, we expect, or we would define the appointment as being accepted once the B12 has been signed off by the reviewer. Planning meeting once the B23 has been signed off, roll 2 again by the reviewer. When it comes to things like the planning being ready for review, there's a group of documents there that we expect to be prepared and reviewed. Okay, so we are trying to express there how we determined that event to have been achieved. That will look slightly different on the hat templates, but certainly along the same sort of lines. Okay, and you were submitting and close that document, and that will then publish those expectations. Similar kind of thing with the key deliverables. Once you save the document, that will either happen through an auto save, or when you close and save, that information will be pushed up to the cloud. Okay. Now, when it comes to corporation tax, the last one I haven't mentioned, really you don't have to do anything. There aren't too many deadlines that we need to necessarily plug in, apart from the obvious one, which is already kind of captured within the general workings of that engagement anyway. So, okay, so that hopefully that's covered setting the deadlines. The information button here, we hope in the future that will obviously give you a bit more information again about how the deadlines are seen to be met as far as a CaseWare file is concerned. Again, for the beta period, we haven't quite got those finalized just yet. Okay, but this is where the release notes really come in, and the reason why I did want you to take those. For example, accounts production tracker. This is an appendix 2 to the EPAC that was released on Friday, the 8th of June. And it will give you pretty much all the information I'm giving you today, but it will express the events and how we see those as being actioned. For example, the wizard being complete. Well, we'd say that was once the wizard has been marked as prepared. It doesn't necessarily need to be reviewed to be completed. Whereas, when it comes to things like sent to client, once you've entered the date sent to client field in the completion section of the wizard, we would see that as expressing sent to client. So that's why I think those documents are particularly useful. Okay, we do need to look at how we access trackers. Okay, there's a couple of ways to do it. Hopefully most of you are familiar with the idea, if you're cloud users, that you can log into CaseWare Cloud. You may not do it too often, but you can obviously access trackers from here. So if I've literally just logged into this server, I'm working for Firm Leader & Co. And this is normally what I would see when I log in. This is my timeline. Okay, so a couple of things then. Well, firstly, it's filtered by a particular entity. Okay, so that's trying to help me out, but actually really what I'm looking for here is a portfolio overview. So therefore, marking that to all entities is probably what I should be doing. And then these trackers are dashboards. Okay, so if I access dashboards, you can see the very first one there now is accounts engagement tracker for me. Okay, so these will activate once we activate trackers on your cloud server. This is why we need you to email us at beta@caseware.co.uk for us to enable them for you. So you won't see these just now. You will need to let us know that you want to see them. Okay, so there's my accounts production dashboard. Okay, just to remind you of some of those filters, so I can filter by those engagements assigned to me. So that's hopefully something we need to get people to understand. And you can see there I've only got sort of 5 to look at there, which is a lot more manageable. These are my engagements, my workload, if you like. And just another one, just to point out as well, the other filter, the ability to filter by those engagements that are completed. Well, that's the default assumption. We don't want to see completed engagements, but if I was to turn off, if you like, that filter, you can see now that Fresh Fruits Limited pops in. Although it's been completed, it's now going to show. Okay, but typically I think that's probably not necessary. Okay, so how do we assign engagements to ourselves? Well, it's fairly straightforward, and it's something that we need to get used to seeing. If I was to click on, for example, Crest Furniture Limited, this overview of the engagement file is something that perhaps some of you have seen, but perhaps also a lot of you haven't. And this is how you can assign users to the file. So for example, here I'll just type in Bob. Bob is now assigned as part of the group working on this engagement. It takes a couple of seconds. Okay, it just means now that when Bob looks at his tracker, he will be able to filter and see this particular engagement as part of his assigned items. Okay. Quicker way of doing that, arguably, is if you're already in the engagement file, as you typically will be at some point, if you go to the Cloud tab, click on Engagement, that will take you to that very same screen. Okay, so you're already logged into CaseWare Cloud using SmartSync, therefore there's no need for you to log in. It knows who you are, and it knows what it wants to show you, and you can see that exact same screen from there. Okay, and again, there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to look at trackers from here. Okay, again, remember the filter. The filter's assuming that you only want to look at stuff to do with Crest Furniture Limited because that's the file you're in, but there's nothing stopping you switching that back out. So that's how you access them. I will just finish by talking about the fact that you can build your own dashboards, and that is something that we need to perhaps get more used to as a group of users. But before we do that, let's just kind of sign off something in here just to kind of action an event, just so you can see how that works. So the account's being reviewed. It's due 14th of June. Today's the 11th of June, hence my tracker is telling me I'm 3 days away from that. So, well, let's actually do some work then. So, firstly, I need to accept that the accounts document has been reviewed. Okay, so I'm not actually physically going to review it today just to save time, but clearly you would in reality, and you would mark it as reviewed just by right-clicking, sign it off as reviewed. If I flick back to the wizard, then you can see now my initials have popped in, so that's now done. At some point, the document would save, whether that's on closing or auto-save, and at that point, that's when the information is passed up to CaseWare Cloud, up to your tracker. So if I just refresh this view, sorry, you'll see now, fingers crossed, that engagement has moved on. So I can see there that Crest Furniture Limited signed off by me today. Okay, so there's nothing immediately due on that one. But really, we're expecting the accounts to be sent to the client on the 20th of June. Not sure why there's a bit of a delay there, but you know that's what's been marked in the expectations. Okay, just to cover off the other two trackers then as well, if I come back to dashboards, so we've got the accounts dashboard, we've got the corporation tax tracker. Just spend a couple of minutes looking at this as well. It's slightly different in that we don't have as many events to worry about. We have some very key ones, but not quite as many. The big one being obviously submitted to HMRC. And the way that we sort of track the urgency, if you like, is through these triangles. So yellow then means, well, this is due within 30 days. So this 30th of June year end is due sort of 19 days from now, 30th of June 2019. So that's within our 30 days. If it's orange, it means it's within 7 days. And if it's red, it means it's really overdue now. Okay, so that, again, some fairly clear markings there. And you know, when you're looking at things like the sorting or the ordering of these engagements, clearly sorting by that very obvious tracking column there, the amount of days until due, if you like, is quite an important one. So that's clearly going to put straight at the top of your list anything that's overdue or almost due in order of when they're due. So that's hopefully really helpful. If you click on any of these events, and this is the same for every tracker, it does give you a bit more information. Clearly with tax, a bit more information about perhaps the tax outstanding, and due dates and that kind of thing. And if I just move again, just to just cover off the last tracker, which is the audit tracker. You'll see there that I'm slightly not quite doing as well on audit, but I've got some things happening here. I'm a few days away from deadlines here and here. But again, if I was to click on something, it does give me a bit more information about who's done what. Or sorry, when it was done rather than who. Just to explain that as well, with the accounts, I think it's very easy to point out or pinpoint who specifically signed off a document or whatever. Whereas with an audit, it's normally a collection of documents, and therefore to delegate one particular person that has signing off the planning, for example, would be a bit unfair. So we don't necessarily mark individuals there. Now, one thing you can do then, just to sort of finish off, is build your own dashboard. And to be fair, that's probably the recommendation I would give. So if I was to create a new dashboard here, Rob's dashboard, if I want to share it with staff, I can, but I don't really want to. It's mine. What I would then be able to do is pick out what content I want in my dashboard. So things like discussions, file requests, tasks. If you're using those tools, clearly having a summary of those on your dashboard is useful. Again, if you're using time and billing, having top 10 WIP clients, analysis of all sorts of different stuff, clearly that's useful. A list of engagement files, whether that be working papers, cloud engagements, whatever, having those listed, picking filters and views from those as well. But yeah, that's where trackers comes in, I think. If I look at engagement trackers, having each of these accounts or audit or corp tax, and you can see there's a couple of, I would say that those are even pre-beta, if you like. We're looking at the personal tax products that are coming out later this year, so having trackers already set for those is quite important as well. Okay, so you can see that we're taking trackers very seriously. We want to make sure they're really part of any new product we build. And yeah, you can configure your dashboard to show all or some of those. And really what that means is, if I say that, it means that my dashboard, the thing I want to look at, ideally when I log in probably, and I'll come on to how you can make this kind of your startup page in a second. But yeah, hopefully you can see that this is a useful way of collecting information. So just on that point, if I go to my settings and go to startup settings, you can use the dashboard tool as being your startup screen, and I can pick out my dashboard or Rob's dashboard, whichever one it is you want to use, as being your startup screen and save that. And that just means whenever I log in, that's the first thing I see. Okay. And if you don't like the fact that the filters have been assigned, then you can obviously remove that. So you can create as many dashboards as you want and configure them how you want. And really that dashboard also, it's probably worth mentioning, if you're coming into cloud from here, from working papers, again, that is the startup screen. Okay, so I've covered everything I wanted to cover. We explained hopefully what trackers were. We saw how to set deadlines, whether that be for audit or accounts. Tax is really predefined. I've shown you how to access them, and obviously there are some filtering options you can use. If I'm honest, the filtering options is something we really want to push out and expand on. So I'm hoping in due course those filtering options will start to expand into things like, not just filtering your particular assignments, but for a particular period end, or for those that have a problem, for example. So those hopefully will expand in due course. So hopefully we've had some questions as well. So what I'll do is I'll pass back to Georgie, and we'll see what questions we've had coming in.
Perfect. Thank you, Rob. Thank you to those that have sent a question. Please feel free to carry on logging them, and we will get back to you later today. We'll also look to include them in the Q&A document. We do have a few moments now just to cover a couple of the questions. The first one being, can the key deliverables be customized?
Yeah, no, good question. I think it's something we want to look at doing. We've started with some obvious ones we think will suit a lot of people, but probably not everyone. So we'll start with these. We'll make sure the beta group, look at those and consider those within their testing, and hopefully, we'll get some feedback on whether they're suitable or not. Ultimately, to be able to customize them for your specific firm, if ultimately that's what you want to do, I think we need to look at that option. So I'm hoping that within time we should be able to look into that and start allowing that. But step one is just to get the basics out of the box options out.
Perfect, thank you. And secondly, I'd like to look at CaseWare's corporation tax module. Can you send me some more information, please?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we'll pass that on. I think if you are interested in corporation tax, your account manager for CaseWare is probably your first port of call. But by all means, we'll try and send some information across. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, so that concludes the questions today. So if we look at our training options available, so you have a hand-on course which can be delivered to you where we come out to your offices. Or alternatively, we do have the CaseWare Cloud e-course up and available on our website. That is a free of charge course, so you can access that via the training section on our caseware.co.uk website. And if you go ahead and enter your details into the purchase field, you will be sent the link to access that. Again, that is a free of charge course, so go over and take a look at that. So if we look ahead at our upcoming webinars, we have a webinar on corp tax. That's regarding the corporation tax EPAC that was released. Also, we've got an introduction to CaseWare client services that will be talking through knowledge base, the go to assist functionality, and various other elements too. We also have the accounts advanced EPAC webinar that will just run through what was released in that EPAC in a little more detail. We also have creating and editing custom tables. That is a webinar that will talk you through the various options available when creating custom tables within the accounts document. And also we have a primary statements, income statement and balance sheet editing, which will go through in detail those two statements and the various editing functionalities available to you. So to go ahead and register for those webinars, they can be found on the events section of our website. So that concludes today's webinar. Thank you very much for your time today, and we do hope you enjoyed the webinar. Please take the time at the end to complete the feedback form. We'd really appreciate it. And also, if you have any ideas for future content, please let us know and we'll look to include them on our schedule. Thank you very much for your time today and enjoy the rest of your day.